Hi, everyone. I'm Derek. I'm the first author, and I'm very happy to introduce our work. Back in the code of juxtaposition, an AI model understands the humorous contradictions. This is a joint work with my amazing collaborators from both Hong Kong Polytechnic University and Case Western Reserve University. Okay, so I'll get started with a sample comic. So given a comic with two panels, a yes panel and a but panel, these two panels, they together form a contradictory narrative. In this study, we aim to tackle the task of understanding such comics which with the juxtaposition or with a contradiction. So for example, let's take a look at this comic. In the yes panel, it shows a car stops to which a line of ducks cross the road. While in the back panel, it shows the same person, the same driver, um, go to this Peking duck for lunch. So the contradiction comes from that the driver's compassion for the ducks in the first panel with the different attitude towards the ducks in the second panel. Okay, so humans can easily recognize such ironic twist or humorous contradictions by looking at this kind of comic. But how about the AI models, the VLM, which is vision language models? So because nowadays, like the AI models are powerful, but when we give let's say the GPT-4 this comic, actually it works pretty bad. Like it gives the illustration as shown on the right hand side. It says that the comic presents a contradiction between two panels. The first depicts a character claiming to be working hard. So that's totally different, like from the narrative of this comic. So in this study, we aim to evaluate how the current large models they perform on this contradictory comic understanding. So a question is that why this task is so hard for AI models? Well, it's pretty easy for humans because actually understanding the juxtaposition-based humor requires these two abilities. The first is human norms because a comic is about our life, about the daily events. So to correctly understand the underlying um, semantics of the comic, it requires models to first understand the implicit social context and cultural references behind the humor. And also, the model needs to recognize the hidden narrative that links to disparate images. But however, for the current AI models, it's still not good at the understanding this kind of human norms, so it's hard for them to understand the comics. And the second, it's non-linear reasoning because for this kind of comic, it's different from story, which the narrative usually linearly, like in a linear progression. But for the comic, it's different that you need to first identify the key elements of those two panels and then you need to compare them and find the similarities and dissimilarities so that you can understand the underlying semantics. Okay, so to study this task, we first build a new data set. It's called ESBAT, which is a data set for juxtaposition-based humor. So our data set contains a collection of two-panel comics, such as this one, with the contradictory narratives. And each comic is annotated with several elements, which I'll introduce in the later parts. And based on the elements, we design a series of tasks to evaluating the model's ability on humor understanding in different levels. Okay, so let's first move to our data set. And here it's a sample overview. For a sample, it first contains a comic image with two panels, and then it has a literal description. So this literal description, it's very surface form of the caption, like what this image talks about. So that's pretty shallow. And then it's a contradiction. So contradiction is usually a sentence that illustrates what contradictions comes from this narrative. And then we also annotate the underlying philosophy. So underlying philosophy is more like the deeper semantics, what this comic aims to review, and also the title. So the title is more abstract, like the summarization of this comic. Okay, so for underlying philosophy and the title, we annotate a bunch of candidates where like one candidate is correct and the other candidates they are hard negatives. Okay, so and then I'll introduce our data construction pipeline. So because constructing such benchmark is very labor intensive and very expensive, so we first design a human AI collaboration annotation stage. So basically, given a comic, we first ask the annotators to write. So the first step is to write the narrative description, including a literal description of this image and the contradiction illustration of the narrative. So during this annotation stage, the human annotators can work together with the AI models, for example, ChatGPT, to do this together. Um, and then in the second step, based on the narrative contents, they will design deep semantic contents, including the underlying philosophies as well as the titles. So after the first stage, we have the initial benchmark, but the problem is that comic understanding is pretty subjective. So different people may have different like understandings of the humors. So we introduced the second stage, which is a quality check and a cross verification stage. So we ask the different annotators to double check the annotated comics and the elements to make sure that there is no bias or there's no ambiguity of the annotations. Okay. So after this whole process, we have our final version of the data set, this ESPA data set. Then based on our annotations, we design a series of tasks to evaluate the model's ability on comic understanding. But so because like this kind of comic understanding or humor understanding is a pretty complex ability, so we design tasks from different levels. So for example, the first task is called literal descriptive writing. That's pretty on the surface level. We're given this image, we ask the model to write the literal description. And the second one is contradiction generation. We are given this image, we ask the model to write the contradiction illustration. So these two tasks are formed as the text generation task because the model is it's required to write a text about this about the illustration. And the third task is philosophy selection, where so we call that for the philosophy because for each image we annotate the a bunch of like candidates where one candidate is positive and others are negative. So we form this task as a multi-question, multiple choice question answering, where we give the model this image, give the question, and we ask the model to select the correct one. And the same is done for title matching. So where it's also a MCQ, multi-choice question answering task. So our task design is important because so we design tasks from different levels, from the surface level, shallow level to the more deep semantic understanding level, so that we can assess the model ability on different aspects. For example, to correctly understand this comic, the model is required to first correctly conduct the correct visual interpretation because the input is an image. You need to first understand what this image talks about, and also nonlinear reasoning about like the key elements and their comparisons, and also the deep comprehension of the human norms because like if you want to understand the underlying philosophy, then sometimes you need to understand the human norms so that you can better like capture the whole narrative as well as a bidirectional reasoning because again it's a two-panel comic. You need to do the comparison. And such like task design is important because by like evaluating the model's abilities on different aspects, we aim to advance the narrative reasoning of the AI and also deepen its understanding of the such complex humor. And also it has a potential to empower the AI design for this creativity and innovation of the human art and also social intelligence for the AI systems. Okay, then I'll move to the experiments. So for experiments, we include the current state-of-the-art large models, both the commercial models such as GPT-4 and Cloud 3, as well as some open source models like say Lava, InstructLeap, uh, Qianwen, and etc. So we call that for the literal description and contradiction because they are text generation tasks. So we adopt the metrics from the text generation research using the BERT, root, and the GPT score to evaluate their performance. So the higher score means the better quality. And for the last two, philosophy and the title, because they are MCQ, multi-choice question answering, so we use accuracy to measure their performance. So roughly from this table, we can see basically all the model perform not perfectly. Actually, it's pretty bad. For example, for philosophy, like even the GPT-4 only achieves 82% of the accuracy. And for title matching, the performance is even worse. Like the best one is just 60% of accuracy. So here are the highlights of the experiment results. So first, we can notice that the model size matters, which means usually the larger model can achieve the better performance. The reason is that because larger model usually has a better reasoning ability, and understanding such humor contradiction requires reasoning. And second is that compared to the narrative understanding, such as like the content writing, the deep reasoning is more difficult. Let's say the philosophy and the title matching usually achieves the lower performance for the models than the first two tasks. And an interesting observation is that the title matching is more difficult. It's more difficult, and we can say the model achieves the worst performance on title matching task compared with the other three. The reason is that the title is more abstract, a summary of this image narrative. So compared to other tasks, it requires the model to have a better reasoning ability to both understand this comic as well as to summarize like the key contents to identify the correct title. Okay. Um, and 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 then we also do some analysis on the impact of literal description quality. So the reason is that the input to the model is a image, it's a common image. So if the model, let's say if the model has a very bad visual interpretation ability, like it cannot even like conduct the content reasoning. So here in this analysis, instead of just give the image only, we also give the image as well as our oracle description. Oracle description means the description annotated by human beings. So we give this to the model and we evaluate the model performance on philosophy and title matching. So as you can see, after giving those oracle description, actually the results of all the models boost significantly on both tasks. This shows that the current AI models, they still perform pretty like bad for the visual interpretation. So let's say given the image, common image, the model cannot very well capture like the meaning of the image. Okay. And finally, we also categorize several common errors that the current model tend to make for this task. The first error is called visual misinterpretation, which is relevant to the last slide. The model incorrectly interprets the image contents. So for example, let's say given this comic, the yes panel shows a reader, but this is disposable reader. But the back panel shows this user actually use this reader forever, like from the young to old. So that's different from the disposable. But however, the model generated outputs, they say something, for example, like GPT-4 says, this comic implies promise of quality and the actual inferior performance. That's like this comics has nothing to do with the quality. So which means this still like cannot well interpret the visual information. So this highlights the need for future research to incorporate models' visual interpretation capabilities. And the second common error is in-depth reasoning of the relationship, where models struggle to conduct in-depth reasoning of the relationship between two panels. So for example, as shown in this comic, the yes panel shows a large bed, while the but panel shows actually the bed is used for some like clothes. Uh, and this human only occupies this very small part of the space. So, but however, the model generated outputs, let's say the lava says that the contradiction is the perceived difference by two individuals. Actually, there is only one individual here, and can have different interpretation of the same situation. Actually, it's not the same situation. So the model failed to recognize the K elements and do the comparison. So future work might incorporate the advanced reasoning techniques to further improve their model performance. And a final error type is hallucination and incorrect association, where the model tends to invent some details that are not presented in the comic. So for example, as shown in this comic, the yes panel shows a coffee with this beautiful like creation. But the back panel shows after you put the lid on, actually you cannot see this creation. But however, the model generated output says that, for example, the Cloud 3 says that the paper disposable cups as well as the paper cup is always a sustainable options. So because this comic is not talking about the paper or environment friendly relevant topic, so basically that part is hallucination. And they suggest that the future research might improve the model performance by enhancing their by reduce their hallucinations by like incorporating some word knowledge. Okay, and that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Since you said that the AI models cannot very clearly interpret the images from social aspects, the other aspects like the interpreting the image.
Okay.
And you said that the human references, the human explanation of literal explanation of the image can boost the accuracy.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, will this lead to future research, like how you improve from the aspects, from the problems that you detect in this study by like doing something like improving the prompts of AI or something else?
Yeah, that's a good point. So actually, I think so we need to like say when we evaluate the model performance, we need to disentangle like the visual part and the reasoning part, because the visual part is that like giving you an image, let's say you can like understand what this image talks about, but then when you want to understand this image, you need to do the reasoning. So reasoning, we think it's more about the language part. It's not that like heavily associated with the visual part. So that's two different abilities. So we think the current model, like they work, so as shown in the previous slide. Yeah, here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, here. As shown here, actually, like when you give the oracle descriptions, actually the results boosts, which means that the model does not perform well for this visual interpretation. Like say, given the image, they cannot capture all the key details of the image, so that don't even like mention the subsequent reasoning part. But however, even you give the oracle descriptions, the model performance is, let's say, still not good. For example, so for philosophy, it can only boost, let's say, this lava model from 69 to 85, but 85 is still not a perfect score, which means that the model also needs to be like improved from the reasoning part. So that's two different like abilities that we need to address in the future. Yeah.
Do you think it will, there will be improvements in the models, or will the model plateau and stop improving?
I think it can be like improved for models because so first of all, I think like the more recent models, they tend to have like better reasoning capabilities. If you heard about like the DeepSeek, like compared to the previous model, their reasoning ability is improved. So I think so reasoning is a very general term, but I think let's say if you can better reason, like maybe on other tasks, let's say the math or code, you may also better like reason for this kind of like the comparative reasoning or humor reasoning. So that's one point of view. And the second, I think the current model, they tend to have the better ability for this visual interpretation, because previously the technique is that people usually like train the model like so they separate the language and the visual part that's like disentangled. But I think the future work, they may like try to fuse those two modalities so that the model can handle like them together like both well. So in that sense, maybe like this visual part can be improved, and yeah, the model might give better results in future.
Thank you.
Thank you.